There are stories of warriors who did not fight for gold, nor for kings, nor even for the gods. They fought for something darker. When the rage came upon them, their eyes clouded over with madness, their breath turned to steam, and they tore through shields as if through paper. These were the Berserkers, the cursed champions of Norse legend, men who became beasts, men who forgot mercy, men who forgot themselves. In the chill of northern dawn, after the battle's end, when the blood mist had settled and the screams had quieted, villagers would watch the Berserkers stumble home. Naked, shaking, their skins still marked with the gouges of their own fingernails. Even their comrades kept their distance, because when the rage subsided, what remained was not a hero, but a man haunted by what he'd done. This is not the tale of Viking glory sung by poets around a mead hall fire. This is a truth buried beneath it, of men consumed by fury, worshipping at the altar of war until it devoured them whole. Before we begin, if you're drawn to the hidden stories of history, the ones that pulse with blood, fear, and forgotten human cost, then subscribe and follow for more real events that shape the world in ways we were never meant to forget. The first sound was not the clash of steel, but the breathing, heavy, feral, ragged, the sound of men forcing air through lungs that burned like furnaces. The morning mist hung over the frozen ground, and the smell of iron was already thick in the air before the killing began. Somewhere beyond the fog, a horn wailed, long and low, trembling through the valley like the cry of something ancient. The Berserkers began to move. They had stripped themselves bare to waist, their bodies smeared with ash and animal fat, their eyes wide and unblinking. Some wore wolf pelts over their heads, the fanged jaws hanging down across their faces. Others bore the skins of bears, matted with blood and frost, as though they had flayed the beasts alive just moments before. To look upon them was to see the line between man and monster dissolve. No one knew when the madness began, only that it spread like fire, a tremor in the hands, a low growl in the throat, then the shaking, then the scream. And once the scream started, there was no stopping it. It ripped from the belly, a raw, primal sound that pierced through the din of war and chilled the blood of friend and foe alike. They say it was Odin's gift, that the All-Father himself granted these men the fury of animals, the blindness of pain, the strength that comes from abandoning the self entirely. Others whispered that it was no gift at all, but a curse, a sickness of the mind that stripped away humanity one heartbeat at a time. When they charged, even their comrades stepped aside. Shields shattered beneath their axes. Spears splintered against their flesh. They felt no pain, or if they did, it only drove them deeper into frenzy. The sagas claim that some berserkers bit through iron, that their teeth cracked bone and their eyes gleamed white. There are accounts of them slaughtering entire lines of men before the enemy even raised a sword. But the truest horror was not in what they did to others. It was what they became in the doing. Imagine the moment after, the sudden quiet when the last cry fades. The berserker standing amid the ruin, his body steaming in the cold, the corpses of his enemies, and sometimes his own kin, lying twisted at his feet, his pulse still pounding, his hands still trembling. The trance begins to break. The world comes back into focus, and he sees what he has done. They say some fell to their knees then. Others tore at their hair, their faces. Some simply walked away, into the woods, into the sea, anywhere but home. Because how could they face the world again, knowing what had lived inside them for those few terrible minutes? Warriors, yes. Heroes, perhaps. But at the heart of it, they were men who had seen something no man was meant to see. The beast that lives within us all, once unchained, never fully sleeps again. When the rage began to fade, it did not leave gently. It clung to their bodies like smoke after fire, refusing to disperse. Their muscles twitched long after the battle ended. Their breath came in short, ragged bursts as though their chests were still braced for impact. The blood on their skin was not always that of their enemies. Some bore deep gouges on their arms, scratches down their faces, wounds they had inflicted upon themselves without memory or reason. The Berserker trance was no mere state of fury. It was an unraveling of the self, a total eclipse of reason. Those who survived the field often spoke of waking to silence, a silence so vast it felt like punishment. The sounds of dying men were gone, replaced by the whisper of the wind over the moor and the distant calling of crows. They would look down at their hands, still trembling, still slick with what they could not wash away. Some tried to speak, but the words would not come. Their voices had been torn from them, left somewhere among the bodies. And then came the sickness, the trembling that would not stop, the blood that dried too slowly, the visions that haunted the edges of sleep, of faces torn away, of eyes that stare without accusation, yet could not be forgotten. In the sagas, these men are remembered as gods of war, immortal in their ferocity. But the truth whispered in the longhouses is far sadder. Many berserkers did not die in battle. They wasted away in solitude, unable to eat or sleep, tormented by dreams that left them thrashing in the dark. Their people both revered and feared them. To share mead with a berserker was to sit beside a storm held barely in check. Women crossed themselves with charms when one entered a hall, and children were told not to look them in the eye. The power that once saved villages in war now marked them as cursed. The elders would watch them from a distance, murmuring that such strength could only come from a bargain, and bargains with gods were never struck without a cost. Perhaps that was the cruelest part. The same hands that defended their kin were the hands that trembled over the bowls of food they could not lift. The same voices that once roared in fury, now muttering prayers to be freed from it. What Odin had given them, or what madness had granted, did not fade with the passing of battle. It lingered. It rotted them from within. And so, when the night came, they sat alone beside dying fires, staring into the embers as though searching for their own souls. For in that quiet, they could feel it still, the faint thrum of something ancient and hungry, waiting beneath their skin. The battle had ended, but the beast had not gone. It merely slept. Long before the first axe was raised, before the first war cry shattered the calm of dawn, there was ritual. The berserkers did not descend into their fury by chance. Their madness was cultivated, sacred, deliberate, and terrifyingly precise. In the northern dark, where the wind screamed through the fjords and the stars hung low like the eyes of the gods, the ritual began. They called a hamask, the changing of shape when a man became something more or less than human. By torchlight they gathered, their faces painted with ash, their breath clouding in the frozen air. Around them burned fires, so bright the snow melted into pools that reflected the flames like molten gold. The air smelled of pine resin, smoke, and sweat. In the center of the circle lay offerings of Odin, animal bones, splinters of iron, a cup filled with blood still warm. The seeress, veiled in furs, her hair braided with feathers, would whisper incantations older than memory. She would speak the names of the gods in a voice that trembled like the wind through dry leaves. And then silence. The berserkers would lower themselves to the earth, pressing their hands into the frozen soil, feeling for the pulse of the land beneath them. Some chewed bitter herbs. Others drank mead spiked with hallucinogenic fungus that burned the throat and twisted the senses. It was said that through these rites, they opened a door, one that led not outward, but inward, into the deep chambers of the mind where fear and power were born together. When the chanting began, it was rhythmic and low, rising like the beat of a heart. The men swayed in unison, shoulders trembling, breath quickening. The sound grew until it became a roar, a chorus of growls and snarls that shook the night. Some tore at their skin with their nails, drawing blood to feed the spirit within. Others howled like wolves, calling to something unseen. Those who watched from afar swore they saw shapes moving among the shadows, beasts with eyes of fire, circling the ritual as if drawn to the heat of mortal madness. To the Norse, this was no act of insanity. It was communion. The berserker's fury was a channel through which the divine spoke, the moment when Odin's wisdom and the wildness of the beast became one. The pain, the frenzy, the blood, all of it was sacred. In surrendering themselves to madness, they believed they touched the divine order that pulsed beneath creation, the raw truth of life and death stripped of all reason. But what happens when the sacred is too powerful for mortal hands? When the God you call upon answers, not with blessing, but possession, the line between devotion and damnation grew thinner with each battle, each trance. To feel the gods inside one's veins was to lose oneself completely. And yet, they returned to it, again and again, because once you have glimpsed eternity through madness, how do you go back to being merely human? The morning after the rites was always quiet. The snow around the ritual ground was blackened with soot. The fires reduced to threads of smoke that curled toward a gray sky. The berserkers would rise slowly from where they had collapsed, their bodies slick with sweat, their throats raw from screaming. For a time, they remembered nothing. Faces swam in their minds like reflections in broken water. Flashes of fur, claws, teeth. Some whispered that they had dreamt of running on all fours through forests thick with fog, their hearts drumming in rhythm with something vast and unseen. They called this state berserksgangr, the going berserk, a sacred madness in which the man was consumed by the spirit of the beast. The bear, the wolf, the wild boar, these were not just animals to the Norse. They were emblems of divine rage, avatars of survival and hunger. To take their spirit into oneself was to borrow their power. The berserker became the bear man, the wolf skin, the one who could not be harmed by fire or iron. So said the legends. So believed those who trembled before them. But there was a price for this communion. The trance did not come without cost. To summon the beast was to invite it inside, to let it gnaw at the walls of the mind. The herbs, the mead, the ritual blood, the chanting, all were tools to break open the self, to strip away reason until nothing remained but instinct and wrath. Once that door was open, could it ever truly be closed again? Many historians now believe these rituals were early forms of psychological conditioning, brutal, ecstatic, and devastatingly effective. By destroying fear, they destroyed the very boundaries that define sanity. Villagers spoke of strange things after the ceremonies. Men who walked naked into the woods and returned days later, eyes blank and distant. Warriors who claimed they had seen Odin himself, standing in the smoke, his single eye burning like an ember. Some would fall to their knees in worship. Others would scream until their voices broke, clawing at their own chests as if trying to tear out the god they had swallowed. The sagas say that when battle came, they no longer felt pain. Arrows lodged in their flesh, and they fought on. Blades sliced through muscle, and they laughed. Yet for all their invincibility, there was one wound no blade could cause, the one left by the divine itself. Because when you surrender completely to the gods, when you trade your mind for their power, you cease to belong to this world. You become a vessel for forces that care nothing for love, peace, or rest. When the trance ended, the silence returned, not peace, but absence. The god had departed. The man remained, hollow and trembling. And perhaps, deep down, each berserker knew the truth. The sacred madness that made them unstoppable was not a gift meant to be kept. It was a fire borrowed from the heavens. And every time they called upon it, they burned a little more themselves away. When the rage finally broke, it was never sudden. It ebbed like the tide, leaving behind a landscape unrecognizable to the men who stood upon it. The field was silent now, save for the crackle of dying fires and the soft buzzing of flies that already gathered over the fallen. The berserkers stood among them, dazed, shaking, eyes sunken into hollows that once burned with fire. Their chests still heaved, but there was no rhythm to their breath, only exhaustion, only the faint tremor of life that refused, for now, to leave. They were the last to return from battle. The others, the farmers, the freemen, the warriors of lesser renown, would walk home together, murmuring prayers for the dead and songs for the victory. But the berserkers lingered, unable to move, as if bound to the field by some invisible chain. They were no longer gods of war. They were men again, and men must face what the gods never have to, the aftermath, when they did return to their villages. The celebrations would hush at their approach. The songs faltered, the laughter faded. The berserkers' gaze carried something unsettling, as though they still saw the ghosts of the slain walking beside them. Their clothes were torn, their bodies streaked with dried blood, their hands twitching at the memory of the axe. Even the bravest men avoided their eyes. To meet that stare was to see the battlefield reflected there, and the reflection did not fade easily. Their wives would wait in doorways, clutching the arms of their children. The youngest would hide behind their mother's skirts, not understanding why their father smelled of blood and smoke, or why they flinched at sudden noise. Some nights, the berserkers would wake screaming, believing themselves back in the slaughter. They would tear at their furs, grab for their weapons, only to find their huts still and quiet, their families staring in terror from the corner. There were stories of men who struck their own kin in confusion, their eyes wild, their minds still trapped in the dream of battle. The sagas, written long after, tell of Berserker's strength, how they could slay 10 men before being wounded. But they do not tell the shaking that came after, or the days when they could not eat, or the way the sound of a distant hammer striking could make them drop to their knees, covering their ears. They were prisoners of their own gift. The madness that once served them on the field became a shadow that followed them home. And yet, in the quiet moments before dawn, when the frost clung to the roof and the sea wind crept through the cracks, some would rise and stare into the darkness. They would whisper the names of those they had killed, as if reciting a prayer, not to ask forgiveness, for the gods had no mercy to grant, but simply to remember that they were still men, that their hearts still beat, that beneath all the blood, something human remained. The curse of the Berserker was not death, but survival. The rage that once protected them had no place in the fragile stillness of peace. When the drums of war ceased and the world grew quiet, their minds could not follow. They had been gods in the storm, invincible, unfeeling. But in the calm that followed, they became something far smaller, mortal, vulnerable, haunted. The villagers learned to recognize the signs. A Berserker would walk the fields at dusk, silent, his feet leaving no sound on the frost. He would stop by the edge of the forest and stand there for hours, staring into the dark, listening for something no one else could hear. Sometimes he would speak softly to himself, to the trees, or to ghosts only he could see. The children would whisper that he was calling to the dead, his own comrades, or perhaps the beasts whose spirits had once shared his flesh. The elders called it the after-age, a sickness of the soul that no healer could cure. In some villages, the Berserkers became outcasts. They were feared not for what they might do, but for what they had already done and might remember. There were tales of families who locked their sons in sheds at night, chaining them to the walls when the moon was full. Others simply vanished into the wilderness, leaving behind wives, children, and names that no one dared speak again. They became wanderers, half men, half myths, glimpsed in the fog along the fjords, muttering to themselves, their eyes glowing faintly in the torchlight before disappearing back into the trees. There was a sadness to them that words could not hold. They were not proud of their power, nor ashamed of it. They carried it the way a man carries a wound that will not heal, too deep to touch, too old to forget. Some sought redemption through service to their kings, others through prayer, kneeling before wooden idols with bloodied hands. But even in worship, the rage stirred. When the wind rose or thunder cracked across the sky, their bodies would tense, their breath quicken. The beast within them never died. It only waited for permission. And yet, there was something tragic in the way they longed for it, for that moment of total abandon when fear vanished and the self dissolved. They missed the madness, the power, the freedom. It was the cruelest irony of all. The very thing that destroyed them was also the only time they ever felt alive. Some historians write that the Berserkers were eventually driven mad by what we might now call trauma, the mind's rebellion against its own horrors. But to those who lived beside them, there was no name for it, only silence, the kind of silence that follows great storms, when the earth itself seems to hold its breath, unsure if peace has truly come or if another tempest waits beyond the horizon. And so the Berserkers lingered on the edges of their world. Not warriors, not monsters, but men lost between the two, forever waiting for the next battle to wake them, or for death to finally grant them the quiet their gods never could. Time, as it always does, turned against them. The age of gods and chaos was fading, and in its place came the age of kings, an age of order, law, and the slow suffocation of wildness. The Berserkers, who had once been the terror and pride of the North, now found themselves relics of a world that no longer wanted them. Their rage, once holy, was now dangerous. Their madness, once divine, had become a threat to the fragile rule of men who built kingdoms on control. The kings of the North no longer wanted warriors who answered to no one but the whisper of Odin in their blood. They wanted soldiers, obedient, disciplined, predictable. And the Berserkers were none of these things. Where once their howls were omens of victory, they were now seen as portents of ruin. Too many feasts had ended in slaughter when a Berserker's temper broke. Too many courts had watched a once loyal champion tear apart his comrades in a drunken fit, unable to distinguish friend from foe when the red mist returned. In Iceland, in Norway, in the far reaches of Sweden, laws were written to tame them or to erase them. The old sagas speak of Gragas, the Grey Goose laws, which forbade the act of going berserk. To enter that sacred madness was now a crime punishable by exile or death. The same trance once hailed as a gift from Odin was redefined as blasphemy, an offense not against men but against order itself. The kings had learned what the villagers had always feared. A man who cannot be ruled by fear cannot be ruled at all, and so the berserkers began to disappear. Some were executed, beheaded in the squares they had once defended, their heads mounted as warnings to others who might embrace the old ways. Others fled into the wilderness, where they became little more than legends, shadows that haunted the forests and mountains, muttering prayers to forgotten gods. The world was changing, and there was no place left for men who walked between beast and divinity. Yet, for all their attempts to erase them, the kings could not fully succeed. For even as the berserkers' bodies vanished, their myth endured, whispered in longhouses and sung in the dim corners of mead halls by those who still remember when the world had been wild and the gods close enough to touch. The kings could outlaw the frenzy, but they could not kill the memory of it. And perhaps, deep down, even the kings knew the truth. Their thrones were built upon the bones of men like these. Without the berserkers, the North might never have been conquered at all. The transformation of the North was not only written in law, but in silence. The hymns to Odin grew softer, replaced by prayers to a new god who preached peace and forgiveness. Ideas as alien to the old warriors as the calm sea was to the storm. The arrival of Christianity brought more than crosses and priests. It brought structure, morality, and the slow erasure of everything untamed. For the berserkers, this was a final betrayal. Where once the frenzy was seen as sacred communion, now it was branded as sin, possession not by divine spirits, but by demons. Priests preached that the berserkers were cursed, their strength unnatural, their madness proof of the devil's hand. They were hunted, shunned, and driven into the corners of the world where the old gods still lingered. In the caves, the forests, the distant fjords where no church bell could reach. There, they lived as ghosts, wandering through snow and shadow, clutching to fading memories of glory. But legends say some fought back. In remote settlements, a few berserkers refused to yield to the new order. They gathered in hidden circles, performing their rites in secret, calling on Odin's ravens to remember their names. They spoke of the end of days, of Ragnarok, when the old gods would return and the world would burn clean again. They believed that when that day came, the berserkers would rise once more, their fury renewed, their names redeemed. Yet the centuries stretched on, and Ragnarok did not come. The silence of the gods became unbearable. The last of them, the true berserkers, are said to have died not in battle, but in despair. Some drowned themselves in icy lakes, believing they would wake in Valhalla if only they could die in the cold. Others walked into the mountains during the first snows and never came down. Those who remained alive blended into a world they once defied. Their children born into peace they could neither understand nor love. The madness had ended, or so people believed. And yet, traces remained. In the sagas, in the words of poets, in the fear that lingered whenever thunder broke too close to home. The berserkers became myth. The wild men who once drank the blood of gods, who fought with the strength of beasts, and whose screams had once made armies falter. They were turned into symbols, stripped of flesh and pain, immortalized not as men but as monsters or martyrs, depending on who told the tale. The kings won their peace. The priests built their churches. The old world faded into dust. But sometimes, when a storm rolled across the fjords and the lightning split the sky, the elders would fall silent. They would say it was the old gods stirring in their sleep, dreaming of the age when men still howled back at them. Because though the berserkers had been destroyed, their echo remained, carried on the wind like a forgotten prayer. The world had grown quiet. But beneath that quiet, the wild heart of the North still beat, faint and defiant, waiting for someone mad enough to listen. Centuries passed, and the world forgot their names. The kingdoms of the North turned to stone and scripture, their people clothed not in furs but in faith. Yet beneath that calm surface, beneath the hymns and the churches and the quiet obedience, something ancient still stirred. The berserkers were gone, but their shadow endured. You could hear it in the stories whispered by the fire on winter nights, when the wind moaned against the doors, and even the bravest men shivered without knowing why. They were called Ulfanar, the wolf men, warriors who wore the pelts of wolves and fought with their spirits burning inside them. The sagas said they could not be harmed by iron, that their wounds closed before blood could fall. Even after their kind vanished, the stories remained, carried in the mouths of travelers, in the songs of poets, in the terrified dreams of those who still believed the wild had a voice. Over time, the truth blurred into legend and legend into myth. But myth has a way of surviving where memory fails. In the quiet of monasteries, Christian scribes copied down the tales of the old world, uncertain whether to condemn or preserve them. And in doing so, they kept the berserkers alive. Their image, part man, part beast, would haunt the centuries to come. The wolf man, the shapeshifter, the creature who lost his humanity under the light of the moon. What began as a story of sacred warriors became the seed of countless nightmares. In medieval Europe, whispers of werewolves began to spread. Men who turned into beasts, who killed without reason, who could not control the hunger within them. The echo of the berserker was there in every one. The transformation had shifted from holy to monstrous, but the fear it inspired remained the same. People still trembled at the thought of a man surrendering to something primal, of the civilized mask cracking to reveal what lurks beneath. The berserker may have fought for Odin, but the idea he embodied, the fragile line between man and beast, belonged to all ages. Even today, the word survives. Berserk, a word spoken casually now, stripped of its terror, used to describe chaos, anger, passion. But beneath that modern simplicity lies a history soaked in blood and trembling devotion. Few who use the word know that it once described men who stood naked in the snow, eyes white with frenzy, believing themselves gods. Fewer still know that the rage we romanticize was once the very thing that destroyed them. The wolfmen are gone. The world they belonged has long been buried beneath the march of civilization. But sometimes when the thin veneer of order cracks, in moment of panic, violence, or blind fury, the memory returns. A heartbeat quickens, a voice rises, reason fades. And in that instant, we remember that the wild was never truly conquered. It merely learned to wear a different face. There's a strange irony in how the world remembers its monsters. Time blunts their edges, polishes their cruelty into poetry, and turns their suffering into spectacle. So it was with the berserkers. What was once terror became fascination. What was once madness became myth. Yet beneath the veil of legend, the truth still breathes, fragile, human, and aching. The berserkers were not born of evil, but of longing. The yearning to be more than flesh, to escape fear, to stand face to face with the divine, even if it meant losing everything. Historians have searched the ruins of the North for proof of their existence. Bones, weapons, carvings, but what they find is less tangible. Fragments of sagas, lines of verse that speak of men whose fury outlived their names. Some scholars call them symbols of psychological warfare. Others see them as victims of their own belief. Yet none can deny the imprint they left upon the human story. They were the embodiment of our oldest paradox, that to transcend humanity, one must first destroy it. In every era that followed, the shadow of the berserker returned in new forms. Medieval knights who fought in divine frenzy, samurai who sought death as a form of honor, soldiers in every age who spoke of battle as something that swallowed the self whole. The faces changed, the weapons changed, but the hunger remained. The berserker spirit, that dangerous blend of faith, fury, and freedom, was not buried in the North. It simply found new hosts. And yet, for all their ferocity, their story is one of tragedy. They gave everything to their gods, their kings, their cause. And when the world changed, it forgot them. The sagas turned them into myth, and myth into caution. The wolf men became warnings whispered to children. Do not let the beast inside you wake. But perhaps that warning was also a kind of mourning, an admission that something vital was lost when the wild was tamed. Because the berserker's madness was not only destruction, it was truth. In those brief moments of frenzy, they stripped away all pretense and faced existence in its rawest form. No illusions, no mercy, only the heartbeat of life and death entwined. Perhaps that is why their story endures, not because we admire their violence, but because we recognize the shadow of ourselves in their struggle. We have built walls, written laws, and forged civilizations to contain what they unleashed. But the same storm still moves beneath our skin. In every cry of rage, every act of blind courage, every moment when a mask slips and the animal stirs, there they are, the Berserkers, the Wolfmen, the sons of Odin, still whispering from the dark. And when the world trembles again, when order breaks and the air fills with fire, perhaps we will hear their howls once more, not as gods, not as monsters, but as reminders of what it means to be human, a creature forever caught between reason and ruin, mercy and madness, civilization and the wild. Their story is not over. It simply sleeps, waiting, as it always has, for the sound of the war horn to wake it.